proudest day, and the proudest time, and the seat of a rally car, because that day and that hour and those minutes, I got the bit between my teeth. You know, I really stood up and was counted and said, this is not getting away. I remember when we pulled on our helmets and Donald says to me, what are we doing? I said, we're going for gold, Barrett. That's all was said. I can still picture that run. That was just the best run ever.
Welcome along to Krunching Gears, the rally podcast. The 2025 season is going strong, and Connor, we've another very interesting episode ahead.
Yeah, look, we're always trying to get in and behind the scenes and dig up the stories and you know, bring people to I suppose to the fore for a chance for us to chat to them and get to hear what their contribution was to the sport of rallying. And today we have a fantastic story with, you know, a really well-renowned rally engineer who's, you know, had a huge contribution to rallying.
Yeah, I wait to hear this story. Like the names he drops into the conversation, the cars he drops into the conversation. It's really something else. Ray Sherratt, like, what a guy.
Look, you know, some incredible stories coming up. And again, you know, the connections to Ireland are kind of peppered throughout the whole story as well. But like some of the drivers he's worked with Wilson, with Lovell, you know, Louise Aiken-Walker, David Llewellin, Harri Toivonen, you know,
Ari
Jimmy and Vatanen, yeah, and Jimmy and Colin McRae. Like,
yes.
It's incredible, Kevin. It really was.
It really was. Yeah, like it was an absolute pleasure. I think me and you were just sitting with our mouths wide open, listening to it all. You know, and it was just a fantastic story.
It was. And, you know, again, Ireland has been that test bed, that proving ground, you know, for rally engineering and, you know, new trying out between suspension and engines and everything. And, you know, Ray was at the heart of it with RED, rally engineering developments, and, you know, a team synonymous with some serious drivers.
That's for sure. And I suppose before we go any further, please like, share, subscribe, rate. All those things make a huge difference, and you've been doing it in your droves. And also just to thank each and every one of you, the positivity since this 2025 season, it's just been overwhelming, Connor, really, hasn't it?
Look, it's been super. It really has. You know, we are always trying to find somebody a wee bit different to talk to and to bring those stories. And, you know, you and I, Kevin, we do it because we enjoy hearing those stories and we want to get talking to these people and see what they have to say. But when we get the feedback like we've had and just, you know, it's just incredible. It genuinely is, and we're flattered by it and you know, excited that, you know, people are enjoying it as much as we are.
Yeah, and for our guests to get so much positivity back from it as well too, like it must give them a huge lift as well.
That's it. You know, a lot of these people that we've spoken to haven't maybe been interviewed in a long time, or maybe never been interviewed like this. So it's a chance for them to tell their story and talk about their contribution and what they've done and what they remember about the sport. Sure. And it's just been fantastic to do this. Yeah.
And please, if anybody can think of anybody that would love to hear their story, or you think, God, that guy's got a great story, you know, I think I would love to hear, you know, the ins and outs of that. Please get in contact. You know, like we're on there, we're out there on social media, we're easy enough to find.
Absolutely, yep. We are, and we're always interested to hear if somebody has a great suggestion. You know, like we're always interested to get out there and chat away about rallying and get the stories.
That's for sure. Anyway, no point to us what we're on here. You're here to listen to Ray Sherratt, and as always, I started out by asking him what got him involved in rallying.
Oh Christ, it's difficult to say. I mean. Before I left school, I wanted to be a chef, but my uncle was a pastry chef, and he said, no. He said, there's no money in it. So just up the road from where I lived, there was a garage called Totty's Garage. And the chap that owned the place before the war, used to race motorbikes on the Isle of Man. And my father... he wanted to be a mechanic, but unfortunately, my grandfather, his father, decided that I work on the land because Grandad was a bailiff at a farm. He basically said, well, the land is good enough for me, so you can work on the land. And of course, when I said to my dad, I want to go and be an apprentice mechanic, he grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and dragged me up there. So, yeah, I mean, it was just straight in. Fortunately, the people that own the garage, the son, his first car was a HRG, which was quite a quick open sports car in the day, 1930s sports car. Then he got himself a brand new Cooper S. No, what would it be? A 970 Cooper S. And it got me interested then, obviously, going through my apprenticeship. I'd worked on all sorts of vehicles because not far from where they served me time was Caldy. And that was the place where all like the potato millionaires from Liverpool lived. And they had all sorts of big old Daimlers and Jaguars. And I was put on those from the age of about 17, 18. Clutches on Jaguars, and I just thrived on it, you know. And then once it served me time, they decided they were going to sell the garage anyway, and I didn't like the people that were going to buy it from Liverpool. So I decided that I would go and follow a friend of mine who'd gone over to Liverpool to start to work for a company called AVS, which was Skip Brown. Of the old Skip Brown, well, Sunbeams and God knows what else, you know. I just thrived on the whole lot, you know, through. I taught Skip an awful lot of what he taught me an awful lot. We got on very well. And that really got me fully into the motorsport and the rally side, you know.
And that Skip Brown like is synonymous with, you know, like the Roots group, the Sunbeams, the Avengers, even the Amps before that as well too.
Well, very much so. I mean, when I joined back in '67, Skip was rallying. It would be an ex Pat Moss Healy 3000, the absolute full hit, the full aluminium bodied, disc brakes all round, you know, aluminium heads, and God knows what else it had. And that was such a super quick car in the lanes and that, you know. I'd driven that quite a lot for him. Then we got Cooper S in, and then we went on to Imps and things, you know, and then Avengers. Back in sort of 71, we started on the Avengers. And then he got really too expensive, I think, for what he was doing. And unfortunately, the company folded back in 73. Okay. So I was out of a job by then, you know.
Right.
Yeah. But I had a super time there. I mean, we were doing work for Coventry, which would be Group 6 imp heads. Yes. We were doing all the porting and the wheels ringing and various things, so that I was taking batches down at the time, you know. But after Skip, Keith Billows, he'd navigated for Skip. What would it be? I think it was, probably about 66, I think it was. And Skip said, well, I'll have a word with Keith and see if we can get you a job there. And, of course, that's when I started working for Keith at Hatton Heath, just outside Chester.
Right, yes. And like that probably broadened your horizons then, because Keith loved to rally, and he didn't just rally within the UK, he went out and done a lot of European events as well.
Oh, we did all. We'd been to Holland, to Greece, to Cyprus. Then he got the Manchester Liners Flying Fish sponsorship, and we went to Canada and America. Canada was the first event, Rally of the Ridgew Lakes. That was a World Championship round. We actually got a 4th overall on that, you know, for a privateer, you know, with an Escort twin cam. We were against the factory 124 Spiders and all sorts of things, you know. No, we had a great time out there, and unfortunately, the second one, which was a fortnight later, was the press on Regardless, and that was up in Michigan State, and very sandy stages, and he put it off on a stage right into one of these sort of sandy bog holes, and he couldn't get it out. So, that was the end of that one, But I'd love that. Great event, nice private tier, fourth overall in the World Championship,
Yeah, and back then it wasn't just a matter of going on the internet and booking a boat or flights. No, it must have been a real adventure to organise all those events and to set sail, almost not knowing where you're going to finish up.
Oh God, going back to the 70s, actually getting from England to go to Greece, to either go to Greece and do an event or go to Greece and get a ferry over to Cyprus, you were going through all the various countries, and you had to take, you're supposed to take carnets with you, but Keith wouldn't have it. And every country I went into, I had to blag me way through, Absolutely ridiculous. I got to Germany, on the German border, and on the back of the pickle, I had 25-litre white cans of water, just in case we needed some, problem with the engine or whatever. And in those days, they had these German calculators with a stick. They poked the tank, the width of the tank, the depth of the tank, and they did all this tapping on this computer to find out how much diesel or petrol you got. And you had to pay tax on it, you see, like an import duty.
Oh, right, yes.
Well, they were trying these water butts, and I said, agua. No, he wouldn't believe me. So I put my finger in it, and I tasted it. No. So he tasted it. Oh, okay. And that was a fair bit of money out of the budget that Keith had given me, And then, of course, all the other countries you're going through, into Austria, into Italy, Oh, it was ridiculous, going through Yugoslavia, Twice I'd done that trip. And the last time I went through there was tanks on the corner of the streets. And the locals had picked up they pulled up all the cobbles off the street and they were throwing them at the tanks. That was the end of the Yugoslav regime, before it all sort of kicked off in the 90s, was it, or something, But, great times. Really loved the travelling as well, seeing so much of the world,
Because there was no 2 days the same, and now you left each morning from you didn't even know where you were going to finish up that night. You just kept driving until you got to a town and thought, right, we'll stop here for tonight.
I just drove and drove, until you couldn't drive anymore. You'd be doing sort of 3 days and 2 nights, constant driving, and then you get to the only time you get any rest really is when you come through France to get into Spain, and the Spanish shut the border at midnight and they didn't open it until 6 in the morning. It took you about 3 hours to get through that border control anyway, so you got time to get a rest then,
Yeah. And even the thoughts of that now, and obviously before Brexit, you could drive right from the UK right through to Greece and no paperwork, no nothing. But back then, that was a real expedition.
Oh well, it was a bloody nightmare. I mean, Yugoslavia, there's no motorways there or anything. You'd be driving along, and about every 2 or 3 miles, there'd be a truck off in a field, wrecked. And then you drive into Portugal, going from Spain, the top end, and you'd probably be looking at a day and a half, damn near, to drive down to Lisbon, for the start of the Portuguese events. It's such an awful country to drive down in those days, but now it's bloody motorways all the way through.
And that gives you another great grounding, and that was like Mark 1s and into the Mark 2s as well with Keith towards the end as well, was there?
Keith was a Mark 1, and then I think it would be probably late 74, I think it was. I left Keith through various disagreements, through money and that. And I started working on my own for a chap just up the road, you know. That's when I got the chance to go and do the powerboat racing with the Dry Martini powerboat, you know. That was a nice trip around the world. So that lasted just on 2 years, I think it was.
And was that the kind of equivalent to their Formula One at that time?
Pardon?
Was that the equivalent to the powerboat? Was that their equivalent to Formula One?
Oh, yeah, it was the F1, the Formula One offshore powerboat, you know. Yeah. I mean, you're probably not of an age, but there was an advert for Dry Martini, the tipple, you know, Dry Martini.
Yes.
And they had an advert with the actual cigarette. It was what they call a 40-foot cigarette, which is the shape of the boat. It's got two 600 horsepower, 454 Chevy fuel injected V8s in it, you know. And that was probably the quickest boat I've ever been in. But I mean, now they're doing ridiculous speeds, you know, because you've got Lamborghini V12s. I think they're 9-litre V12s in them these days, you know. So I think they're pulling I think it's 2,000 horsepower just on one engine, you know, and we're pulling just over 1,000 horsepower, you know.
And Ray, what was the attraction to go over to the powerboat? Like, was it a challenge? Was it something different, or was it just the power?
No, I was working for a chap just up the road, and he was buying second-hand vans and trucks, you know. He was a great friend. Well, he had two friends. One was the managing director of Vernon's Pools, which was a football coupon type thing in Liverpool, John Kennelly, and a chap called Ken Casilla. And his father was probably the world's most authority on currency exchange. And he was funding his son's, you know,
plaything,
whatever you want to call it, his hobbies sort of thing. Yeah. I mean, I met Ken before I started with the powerboat when I was working at Totty's Garage, where I shared my time. He bought a brand new Healy 3000. And he'd been to the Moby Dick, which is a pub not far away from us. He got himself absolutely rat-arsed, drove it down a hill called, we call it Smith's Hill, and it was sort of down the hill. It was a very, very fast right-hander into not such a fast left-hander. He lost it on the right-hander. It went broadside into a tree, and he literally cut the car in half. And you know what a Healy 3000, such a damn big chassis. Yeah. It split the chassis from the seat backwards, split it in half. He was perfectly okay, but when I was serving my time at Totty's, we used to go out for the police to drag in crashes. A friend of mine just up the road, you know, and we found the front of the car, but we couldn't find the back of the car. This was 3 o'clock in the morning. So we came back when it was daylight, and the rear of the car was about 200 yards into a tree, up a field, about, God, on the right-hand side, that was it, about 200 yards up the field, you know, and we had to get the farmer's tractor to drag it down for us, because we only had a Land Rover with a little ambulance thing on the back, you know. But that was Ken. He was typical Ken. Oh, he was mad. He had a twin-engine Cessna, and he flew the thing to a place called Abersoch in North Wales. Tried to land it in the field there, and literally took both wings off it between two trees. The man was an absolute fool, you know. Just absolute. Well, you could call him a peahead, you know. Ridiculous.
Yeah. But you talked about the boats, like over 1,200. Like, did you, you know, whenever you were running these boats, did you get the opportunity to sit in them and experience it?
Oh, Christ, yeah. We did. The last race we did was Cowes Torquay, which is the race around the Isle of Wight, And 2 days previous, we'd taken the boat over. And Ken said, I'd like to try it, so we'll take it out in the morning. This was about 7 o'clock in the morning. It was absolute flat calm, but it was dense fog. And we jumped in the boat, cracked it up, started it. Ken was in it. What's his name? Myself and the manager, I can't remember his name anyway. We started off probably about 80 mile an hour going down the Solent, and you couldn't see anything because it's fog. Ken said, sounds like there's a misfire. I said, doesn't sound like a misfire to me. So he whacked the throttles fully open and got it absolutely flat out. He said, yeah, he said, look, sounds like a misfire. He said, go and have a listen. Well, where you stood, there was a wooden plywood circular door that you could unhook and roll out of the way. You could get into the engine room from there. So I got down, went into the engine room. There's 2 engines screaming their nuts off at about 6,000 RPM. Just absolutely beautiful sound, I mean, I'm suffering from tinnitus now for the damn thing, I said, come back up, put the board back in. I said, no, there's no misfire, Ken. It's perfectly all right. Oh, okay, then, he said. And then we went back into the yacht club, tied up, and that was ready for the race 2 days after,
Yeah. Mental.
Absolutely mental, yeah.
Yeah. Health and safety wouldn't have you doing that nowadays.
No, for sure.
And then you left the powerboat scene behind, and was that then when you went to Jeff Fielding then?
Yeah, pretty much. He came to see me. That thing is, I'd been banned from driving through the powerboat side of things, through totting up and that, And when we were at Cowes Torquay, after the start, they go up and they do a loop in the Solent, and then they go around the island. And one boat went over a wake. It threw 3 of the crew out of the boat, but it was still on full throttle. It went round in a couple of circles and come round, and it hit the promenade where all the stones are below the promenade. It hit that, stopped, and it was leaking fuel out all over the place. So I wandered over, policeman there, and I said, what's your problem? He said, we've got the boat here that's leaking fuel. I said, well, I've got a tractor unit and a trailer in the yacht club. Problem is, I'm banned from driving. Okay, he said, okay. So he got on his radio. This chap pulled up in a car. The policeman said, oh, this is the chief constable of the Isle of Wight. He said, have a word with him. And I told him, I said, look, I've been banned in England, but I've been driving all around South America and or in Italy and on the Europe, The man said, come with me. So we went down to the yacht club. He jumped in the passenger seat. I drove, took the trailer down to the thing. They arranged a crane. We craned it back, put it on the crane, on the trailer, took it back to the yacht club, and then about 3 months later, I got a letter from him, from the chief constable, thanking me. He probably saved people's lives, and thank you very much. And if you're ever over again, look me up, sort of thing. So I was quite pleased with that, even though driving a police constable or a chief constable around when I'm banned. But then what happened then, I thought I was in a bit of a loose end. I had a knock on the front door, and it was Jeff. I mean, I'd known Jeff in the AVS days, because I used to do work at night for him, building his Cooper S engine, looking after the car because he did sprint and hill climbs in it, And he said, how do you fancy looking after a rally car for me? He said, I've just bought one and I'd like you to look after it. I said, well, problem is, Jeff, I said, I'm banned from driving. No, he said, doesn't matter, And at the time I'd been doing some work for somebody else. And he said, well, to tell you what I'll do, he said, I'll pick you up at about 6 o'clock in the evening. I'll take you over to my place, which was over the other side of Liverpool. He said, you can look at the car, you can look at the workshop, quite a big L-shaped double garage, And that's what he did. And every night he'd pick me up, take me over, I'd work on it to about midnight, he'd bring me back, and that went on until I got my license back, Went on for probably about 3 or 4 months. The car was ready, and I think the first event we did would be the Burma back in, what would that be? 78, I think it would be the Burma. Right. And then it just took off from there. Mm-hmm. We did it, a brand new shell, brand new Gartrack shell, Mark II, all brand new parts. The Mark I was then sold off. We used the Mark II, which is the old SFW. That was the first of the one I built. Mm-hmm. Then we did, the next one would be FEK. Yes. That was the first van that we had because that was FEK van. Then DMB, which was the one that Roger Clark used for the RAC and the Manx and a couple of other events. And then, of course, another van come along, and that was DMB van,
Yes.
It sort of snowballed from there,
But it was amazing how quick it come, from starting out just with running Jeff to suddenly, you had Roger Clark and, guys queuing up to be run by, as it was at that time, MCD.
It was. I mean, we also had Louise, with the Fiesta, the Group Fiesta. And I think it was all to do, or a lot to do with John Taylor. Okay. We did a fair bit with John. We did a lot with Roger. John was always there with us. Madeira, we did, I think twice we did Madeira. Louise was there as well. Jeff was there, so we had 3-car team over there, Mm-hmm. John was always good on the sort of, come on boys, get your arse into gear sort of thing, He was always cracking the whip, John, Mm-hmm. I know one time in Madeira we were coming back on the coast road to get back to Funchal, to one of the main services, and I'm coming up this hill and there was a truck coming down, and of course I'm on the right-hand side, the truck's on the left-hand side, and this competing Porsche decides to come out from behind the truck, smack straight into the front of DMB, wrote the front of his car off, wrote the front of DMB off. John was in the middle, in the dicky seat, just in the back. He said, right, I'll get a taxi. Come on, Ray, get some tyres off the roof. I'll see you back there. I got, I think it was Ian Best that was with me. I said, right, Ian, come on, let's have a look at this van. So we jumped out, opened the bonnet. All the front panel was buggered, so we took the front panel off, chucked it away. Radiator had gone. Group 4 radiator at the back of the van, few hoses, bit of welding with a bit of strip steel, Got it back going again, and we were in time to go and do main service in the middle of Funchal, Yeah.
It was also the quality of the cars and the preparation. You very quickly built a name for yourselves as well.
Well, yeah, I've always had a good attention to detail. any car that are built, and people who have either bought them or seen them will tell you that the engine bay is clean. If I see something that is not needed, it goes. Everything is run straight. Wiring looms, especially on Mark 1 or 2 Escorts, they come down the top of the inner wings, out of the way from damage in, from the outside, but out away from damage from the exhaust, because most of them come down the exhaust side and they wrap them with heat resistant stuff, but it just doesn't look tidy, And pipework's not to be, it's got to be run nice, so as you can work on it without having to take things off,
Mm-hmm. And like Roger Clark, we have all this visions of Roger, like the daring do of like the upper class sort of gentleman, but fantastic driver. Was he all that whenever you come to work alone with him? Was he like a hero almost of yours?
Roger was very down to earth.
Right.
Very down to earth in his approach to his driving. Like on the RAC, people have sort of berated him when Chris went the wrong direction down the M6. It wasn't as bad as that. I mean, it was just an error. A lot of navigators have done wrong slots, and within 10 minutes, quarter of an hour, you're back in the right place again. We were right in for the service on the motorway service area. We didn't lose any time, but he was such a good thinker, Roger. He'd take me to one side and discuss what he wanted doing to the car, so as there's nobody around. You don't want sort of journalists listening into what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be able to do the job calmly and be able to do it on time. He'd drive the car with a bit of a problem, so as we know that half an hour or an hour later, we have an extra 5 or 10 minutes to be able to sort the problem. And it then gives me time to organise and think in my mind how I'm going to go about doing it,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like that must have been a huge thing, like bringing in somebody like, who had no experience, bringing in Chris Searle from the BBC at that time, and that it put a lot of eyes on Roger that probably a lot of other drivers would have shirked away from, thinking, no, I don't need all that hassle. But he brought somebody on board and still come away. He finished 10th or 11th, didn't he, that year as well?
10th.
10th, yeah.
10th, yeah.
Like that was a huge thing, and that shows the natural ability of the man as well.
Well, it is. Well, you got to think in terms of Jim had always sat alongside him, or Stuart Pegg, when they won the event, and he is relying on the navigator to remember the stages. Roger can remember most of them, I suppose, but there's certain parts of the stages where there might be a particular nasty crest with a right or a left after it, And a good navigator, the likes of Phil Short and all the other people, they would just say, "Oh, hang on," they would have it in their head because there was no notes, you see, in those days,
Yeah, so I to come away with a top 10 result with a virtually inexperienced co-driver, it just says it just speaks volumes of the man himself and his natural ability.
Absolutely, yeah, and also for myself to get a top 10 result on something that was pretty much experimental at the time, because the factory had tried fuel injection and never really got to sorts with it. All the cars I ran for Vatanen and for Roger all ran with fuel injection.
Was that Coolger Fisher injection
system? No, Lucas. Proper Lucas fuel injection.
Ah, right, yes, okay.
Yeah.
So you were a test bed for it almost as well then?
Yeah, well, I'd run several engines with a high pressure, mechanical high pressure pump with the electric high pressures in the back. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why do you need the high pressure mechanical at the front? If you use the two high pressures in the back and put heat sinks on them, which was the problem then, that sorted the problem. And Ari ran like that, and Roger ran like that. And it went right through the RAC. It ran with Ari when we did the circuit back in 81, no, 82,
82.
wasn't it? Yeah. 82, the circuit. It ran all through the circuit without a problem, Yeah. The cars, apart from Ari bashing all the corners, the car ran without really a problem,
Yeah. And you've mentioned now the Ari coming and joining the team. Like Ari was coming world champion. Like he had been, he'd been crowned world champion 3 months previous to this, and was back in the BRC and stepping into one of your cars. Must have been a very proud moment for you.
It was a very proud moment. Yeah. I mean, we had two cars for him. We had one of his old cars, DKP, which was a car that he'd won he'd won Greece in it. It was effectively quite a badly damaged car when it arrived from us, because it was a factory car on loan to Sutton, We rebuilt that car, rebuilt it with fuel injection, and that car was for his gravel use, for the Mintex, for the Welsh, the Scottish. Then we built a brand new car, which was part experimental. The suspension setups and things was experimental on it. We tested that in Northern Ireland. We went over with Ari and John. We went over for 2 or 3 days, got permission off the police to shut a road off, tested down there. Everything was okay. It was just the rear shock settings or the helper spring settings that he wanted to go through. And we spent probably 2 or 3 hours sorting those out. And once we'd finished, he was absolutely over the moon with the way the car handled,
And you're saying it was experimental, like, this was in your head where you wanted to take the car, or was this developments coming through from Borum?
No, that was developments from myself.
Right, yeah. You felt that there was things that you could do that would help to improve the car, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So, like, to get that feedback then from a world champion, that again must give you a lift as well.
Absolutely. I mean, if we'd have had the tyre and the rubber they have today, I feel sure that the car would have been so much better. But the rubber years ago, it wasn't all that particularly good,
And the experimental stuff that you were doing, like with the injectors and with the suspension, like were Ford were they paying attention to what you were doing?
I don't think so, because at the time, I suppose they were backing off from that, and they were going into like the 1700T, which was turbocharged, and then after that, of course, the B200, they'd got experience from the 17T into the B200, But it was nice to have the confidence to do it, and also to have Jeff Fielding sort of back me up and back, obviously, the financial side of it, because it was Jeff that was putting the money in to do everything, Obviously, we had sponsorship from different companies and from the petrol companies and that, but most of it was coming out of Jeff's bank,
Yeah. Because, like, the Black Escort, like, whatever, nearly 40 years later, nearly 45 years later, is still like an iconic car, and everybody you mentioned Ari Vatanen, it's almost one of the first cars you think of, and he only done a handful of events in it, but it just shows you how special that car was.
Yeah. I mean, I'm immensely proud of the recognition I've got from that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we think of the circuit in the 82. Himself and Jimmy had a ding-dong battle that almost lasted, almost 5 days. I think, the both of them run into trouble on the last night, but it looked as if it was going to go down to the wire.
Yeah. We had one scare on the restart after the first day. He started the engine up in Park Ferme and the oil pressure didn't appear. And the engine was experimental as well, because it was to do with the B200 engine side of things, the twin scavenge pump on the side of the block and the pressure pump driven at the front of the engine, normally where the jack shaft is, so it's driven via the jack shaft, Anyway, we were part way down, I think, is it the M1 out of Belfast, Ian Best and myself, and we got a crackle on the radio, get back here quick, So we raced back as fast as we could, pulled up outside Park Ferme. They'd pushed the car out. I said, crack it up. They started the engine, no oil pressure. Right. So my first thought was something has stuck somewhere, because we hadn't had a problem prior to that, So I got the airline out the back of the van. We've always got air in the van. We had compressor and electric generator on the van, driven by the engine. So I got the airline out the van and I just stuffed it straight up the breather pipe at the back of the bumper that comes out the dry sump tank, and I give it about 30 psi, and you can hear everything sort of going boink, boink, boink. And next minute, Harry shouts, "Yeah, we've got oil pressure." As soon as I sort of pulled my hand away from the pipe I was holding, the car was in gear and it was gone at about 90 miles an hour.
But you talked about the immense pride and all, working with Ari. Was he very methodical when it come to car setup? Did they try and work through everything? And could you see almost why he was so successful?
That's a difficult question to answer, I suppose. The man really, he just drove the motor car, didn't he?
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of feedback from him once he got in the car and he was driving. I got told off one time for swearing. This was on the circuit, I think, after about the fourth or fifth steering arm had fitted, and I was calling it a effing steering arm, and he turned around and said, "Raymond," he said, "it's not." He said, "It's an ordinary steering arm." I just loved working for the fella. He drove the BALLS off the car.
Yeah, and that, I suppose, from an engineer's point of view, that's all you can ask for. That if you give somebody a car that's capable of one, that they take it to that level.
I want him to drive it as hard as he can.
Yeah.
No.
Mm-hmm. But I suppose when it came to service, though, you never knew what condition or what shape it was going to come back in.
No, you didn't. You didn't. No. She'd see it coming down the road with a load of lock on one way and coming down straight the other, Just gives you an idea of what you've got to do, but you just do it and get on with it and, hope that the motor car is still going.
And then you also mentioned around that time, Louise Aiken, we later to call Louise Aiken-Walker, was involved, and Mark Lovell too as well. And that time they were the new kids on the block. They were very exciting talents at that time as well, weren't they? Yeah.
Mark was. He was a bit tame to start with. Mark, he needed pushing in the right direction with various things. We ran him in the Escort Turbo Championship. It wasn't the RS Turbo Escort. Okay. It was a basic Escort with a turbo conversion on it. We ran him in that, and he had some good results. I think we took the championship with that.
Mm-hmm.
He had rides out in SFW. He had, I think, his first ride in a Group 4 Escort. I was writing about it just yesterday. I think it was the Gwynedd. He started quite low down, 78, I think it was, or something like that, and he finished. I think it finished fourth or fifth. You know, he had a good feeling with the car, and he just wanted the confidence to be able to go and do it. You know.
And Louise was another one of those drivers too that started out in the Fiesta, and you got her into an Escort and all as well. And to see the way the two of their careers developed over the next few years, like again, that you just gives them a good ground, and you give them a good understanding, of not only they could drive, but just gives them the understanding of how to develop a car probably as well.
Yeah. It gave me great pleasure to have Louise drive. The Fiesta's been maligned quite a few times, but she had I think it was a 12th on the first Madeira and a 9th on the second Madeira. She had, I can't remember now whether it was a 10th on the Manx with it. It was a super little car. It wanted more development, but of course the factory dropped it,
Yeah. Because it looked at the start that they were going to get behind it, wasn't it? Because they had Roger in the car and they had Ari in the car as well too at the start.
Absolutely, yeah.
And two other names just around that time too would have been Malcolm Wilson and Willie Rutherford as well. Would have driven, MCD prepared cars.
Yeah, Malcolm drove. We went over to Portugal with Malcolm. Unfortunately, it was a fresh engine and it was a head gasket problem. I can't remember. I think that was a Hoyle built engine, that one. It was all right on testing. I think he did 2 stages and the head gasket went, wasn't very happy, but, we came back. We also ran Malcolm, of course, Louise in the RS1600Is. I mean, they were an absolute waste of time. Just it's crazy because the thing was homologated, and it was homologated basically, as far as I understand, for racing. It's okay, you get on the circuit and race it on a flat circuit. You start jumping the thing, 4 or 5 foot off the ground and landing, and you've got reverse torque in the gearbox. What's going to happen? It was a very feeble gearbox. It wasn't until the RAC that we actually got what I wanted in the first place, and that was sandcast cases with proper close ratio gears with the proper diff ratios in it, and they lasted. We didn't have a problem with them.
And was it, like a lot of these developments, was it like a constant fight with Borum to get these developments?
It was. I mean, we had good help from John Wheeler. He did as much as he could, There was a problem. Thanks a lot. Problem which was purely the gearbox. Okay. The engine, with it being nominally aspirated, produced no more than about 138 brake. On a circuit, it wouldn't break a gearbox, you see, because you haven't got reverse torque problems. Rear suspension, we'd altered the rear suspension. That worked out well. But really, we should have carried on with the Fiesta. If we'd have had 2 Fiestas and developed those better, I feel sure we'd have got a much better result on the RAC,
But I suppose maybe Borum was probably pushing for the RS 1600 because that was the new car at the time.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was the only car they had at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They had the Fiesta, of course, but as I say, they just dropped it like that. Yeah. Whether it was something to do with Cologne, because Cologne made the RS 1600Is, I mean, it was a daft thing because the management, the ignition system that was on that engine, it had a pickup which picked up from the flywheel ring gear of all things. And one of the teeth on the ring gear wasn't magnetic. So that had the missing gear or the missing tooth that you have now on modern ignition systems or, management systems. And it couldn't be altered because it was a Bosch system, but the company that did it apparently didn't have permission off Bosch to do it. And these went into the production car. So in the end, we couldn't do anything with it. So we reverted back to a distributor out of a normal XR3i,
Yeah. Sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then, around this time, you started to develop the Sierra, the Sierra, your home-built Sierra as such. Like, what was the thinking behind that? Was it a replacement, in your eyes, for the Mark II, or was it going to be a clubman car, or what was the thought really behind it?
It was basically because the Mercure was run in, I think it was in the States, and it was also on the continent. The Mercure was a 2.4 Pinto turbocharged vehicle, and it was doing well in racing. So we decided that, okay, we'll use the XR4i shell. We'll get a new one of those. We approached Borum for it. They wouldn't supply a shell. So we got one from our local Ford dealer. The engine was a 2-litre cast iron, vacuum brazed cylinder block, turbocharged, built by Terry Hoyle, 380 brake at no more than about £6 boost.
Right.
It was less than half a bar boost.
Yes.
On carburetors, she started first of all with 2-wheel drive. It had a 4HU Jaguar axle in the back with a ZF box. Louise ran that. She did reasonably well in it. It's a big car to throw around, but she'd thrown bigger cars around afterwards, so I suppose it's teaching her how to drive a big car. She drove the
big Nissan then,
the Nissan RS240s. They're quite a big car, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Drove those, and she drove Sierras after that. So we developed it then into the winter of 84, going into 85. We had words with FF Developments to purchase a 4-wheel drive system off them, which was something that goes on the back of a gearbox and a front differential. So we redeveloped it. I made a pattern, a steel pattern, to do a dry sump pan. So as the front diff could be built into the dry sump pan. We had it cast in Widnes. The company there was cast in aluminium. They cast it. I machined it. It all then went together with a Getrag box, which was the Safari Getrag, which had quite a short first gear, so we could get a heavy beast off the line quickly, And again, it was quite successful. Willie won 2 events with it. He would have come behind Malcolm Wilson in the B200 on the Linders farm. If I haven't found out yet, but for some reason, they were given a 30-minute road penalty.
Okay.
So he actually finished 32nd.
Okay.
So if you go back with the times and that, he would have been about, I think it would have been about 1 minute and 10 seconds behind Malcolm in the B200,
Uh-huh. And that was the debut of the RS200 at that stage then, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And Louise actually Louise actually ran against Tony in the 6R4 in '84, you know, and putting up reasonable times against that guy, you know.
Yeah.
And the 4T, that came to Donegal, didn't it? Was Roger Clark?
It did, yeah. We had a problem with it. Had a fire in the carburetors. So, of course, that then stopped Roger and Ellen running it on that event. We brought it back. I didn't want it to go back to Terry Hoyle. I wanted to lift the head myself and find out what the problem was. So they took the cam, took it all apart, took the cam cover or took cam box off it, which is where the cams are. And as I lifted it off, took it down nice and gently, I noticed one of the shims was sat halfway on top of the valve. And that was that was the cylinder that had caught fire. So, what the hell's happened there? And the system, with it being turbocharged, hadn't got a blow-off valve in it. So I discussed this with Terry Hoyle, and she was built, fortunately, with what we call long dick valves, which has got a long stem above the collets. So you could actually make a bucket much deeper to go over the valve stem to stop it. Just if it got blown open, it wouldn't shift the shim, which was only probably about, maybe 2.5, 3 mil deep, off the top of the stem. And apparently, from what I can gather, that went into the development of the B200. So, and that's why we had the fire. It had a backfire in the system with no pressure relief. It blew the valve open, and of course,
game over.
Yeah.
And that car, as you say, for something that you just built to be able to compete with, a Metro 6R4, it was in development, the RS200, it was in development, from, built by yourselves, with that, Ford had got involved with that. Whenever they started developing the Sierra in 85, 86, did they ever come to you and say, show us what you have here?
No. No, they weren't interested. I had very good help from John Wheeler, because when I was talking to John about doing the project, and he said, well, you haven't really got a diff to go in it. And I said, well, look, come on, we can put a Jag diff in it. And, whether he wanted it with Ford parts, I don't know. But he said, what I can do for you, he said, I'll get you a full-size drawing, blueprint, of the Sierra shell, the XR4 shell, or the Sierra shell, because they're all the same, same floor pan, So I got that. And you would not believe that the date on it was August 83. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, on that blueprint, there was a four-wheel drive Sierra with turbocharger, right? Exactly the same as the whale tail turbocharger, which has got the big swan neck manifold on it. That was in the blueprint in 83. Now, why the hell did it take so long to do a four-wheel drive Sapphire?
6-7 years later, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they could have had a world beater whenever the Rally and Munt Group A. They would have had the car to beat the Lancias sitting ready to go.
Absolutely. But that's the way they work. They had, if the workshop wanted something doing or making, they had to go to 3 different people. They had to get 3 different quotes, and that quote then would go to the office, and the office decided which quote they were going to take, which what we were doing at the time, if we had a problem making something, I'd make it. I get to the lathe or to the mill or the welder out and cutting and that, and I'd make the thing, and that would be tested. That was probably one of the problems with the Sierra. We were rallying it and testing it effectively at the same time.
Yeah. Aye, the rallies were your test bed.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the settings that I'd got on that car went on to our first Sierra Cosworth that Jimmy ran on the circuit, right? Because obviously on the Mintex we were supposed to have been getting
the Lanciers,
the full Lancia, which was promised, you know. The the manager, Katanak, and myself went out to Lancia. We spoke to Furio. We had a trip around the factory. We were promised all the parts. Everything's go. So great, you know. We come back home. We got hold of a motor car. Okay, it was right-hand drive, but, you know. So, you know, we went through that, but unfortunately they didn't appear. So it was a mad panic. What the hell do we do? You know, we haven't got anything. Well, we might as well run it as it is, because we know for sure it's going to be snow and ice. So four-wheel drive, at least you've got an advantage, you know. And after that, that's when we basically said, well, we're not going to get anything. So we started off with the Sierra, you know.
And I suppose even before we even get that far, it was the Metro 6R4 coming, like a car that I just think is, you know, the best sounding rally car that's ever been made. Like that debut, its international debut was in Donegal here, very close to my heart. I just think it was an incredible car. What was, like, from your point of view, was it a good car to work on? No.
No, how'd you put it? You know,
Cover your ears, Kevin.
No, there are certain things about it that are awkward. The fitting of a fuel tank, the bladder tank, it is an absolute bitch to fit. To do it properly, you know, to get it all in to start with, then line the crossover pipes up and all the other bits and pieces. You know, it was a bit of a bitch to do, but it was a superb little motor car. It did the job. It did what it was supposed to do. It did what it said on the tin. You know, we had little problems with it. We had some big problems with her. I mean, you look at David. He nearly won the Mintex against McRae in the Quattro. You know? In a strange car.
Brand new to him. He only sat in it that week, more or less, hadn't he? You know, so.
Yeah, we'd had one day testing in Wales with it. You know, okay, we'd done the Gwynedd one, one of the old factory hacks. You know, we'd done the Gwynedd in that, and he of course it snowed, so he got good, good experience from that. But he did a superb job, David. You know.
And even before that, am I right in thinking Jeff was one of the first people to get a privateer car out of the factory as well?
Well, I think Jeff got one because basically his company developed most of British Leyland cars.
Okay, right, yes.
Yeah. Well, you know, MCD, you know, mainland car deliveries, you know.
Yes.
As it still carried on as mainland car deliveries, even though the company was MCD to start with, and in 86, was it? Yeah, 86, the company reverted to RED, Rally Engineering Development, you know. Yes. And that was, the daft thing, that was from Dave Richards. Because Dave, obviously, being into like corporate stuff in his early days with Rothmans, I think Jeff had gone down to see him when they were trying to find out a name for the company, you know, and I think it was Dave Richards that come up with the name.
Yeah, mad.
and again, you know, another crop of exciting drivers in that stage as well with the Metros. You know, you had Harri Toivonen, you had Didier Auriol, you know, some amazing talent you got to work with.
Yeah, Harri, I'd obviously I didn't even know that Harri existed. I knew his brother existed. I didn't know much about Harri, you know. His co-driver, Neil, I mean, I've worked with Neil, or he's navigated my cars for quite a few good years, Neil. You know, he's from North Wales, not far from me. I was surprised that he was quick, but a bit too quick, really, you know, because I mean, he destroyed the car several times, took corners off it, and God knows what else. You know, if it had calmed down a bit, okay, he's driving right-hand car, but you know, so is Auriol driving right-hand car, you know, and he's a bloody Frenchman, you know, who's always competed in a left-hand drive. Well, the R5 Turbo, you know, Maxi Turbo. And then we've got, of course, Auriol. Well, what can I say about Didier? Absolutely fantastic.
Right.
You know, to start with, a bit sort of, you know, Christ, these are strange buggers, aren't they, these Englishmen, you know. You know, we had John Milley out there looking after him. Well, John is a character in himself, you know, John Milley. Broad Yorkshire accent, John. Takes no prisoners, John. You know, he's really good chap to work with. Superb navigator, superb service arranger, you know. And of course, I did the whole of the French event with John in the chase. You know, we had a couple of problems. We had one problem. He'd come off one stage. I think it was somewhere in Montpellier. There was steam coming out the back windows. You know, and he stopped. We opened up the tailgate. What the hell's it steaming for? You know, and I'm looking round, and looked over the back of the engine, and the pulley that drives the water pump from the back of the inlet cam had gone, just totally gone. The belt was still on the water pump, and I thought, Christ, what the hell do we do now? So I looked at John, and I said, "Hey, John, so get in the back of the chase, see what we've got. See if we've got something round that we can cock this up with, you know." So he pulled out the alternator. Now, the alternator is what they call, it's a poly V belt. It's a V-shaped belt, you know, and the drive for the water pump is a tooth belt. You know, oh, Christ, well, it's a belt, isn't it? It'll work, won't it? I said, go and get the nut and bolt box. And we had this big box of nut and bolts, and I knew what size it was. It was 3/8 UNF bolt that holds the pulley on, you know. I grabbed the bolt, grabbed the washer, put it all together, nipped it just a touch, said to Didier, I said, crack it up. He cracked it up. You could see this pulley wobbling, you know. So as it was running, I got my spanner, big spanner, and I give it a whack. It got a bit better. I give it another whack, it went worse. I give it another whack, and it was straight. I said, switch it off, Didier, switch it off. Nipped it up, topped it up with water, off he went down the road. And it went all the way through the morning to midday service. And during that period of time, John and I had sent off Katanak, the manager, back to the hotel because the spare engine was in the hotel in the car park underground, you know.
Yes.
He took the pulley off. We met at service dinner hour. I changed the pulley back to the proper one, put a new belt on it, and we won the event, you know. Yeah. The cog belt, the tooth belt, had the 4 little grooves in it from the poly V.
Well, dug into it, actually, yeah.
They're still there, they're still driving it, you know.
And to beat the French on their home turf with, you know, like with a British car and all too, did they take it well?
Well, we had one or two run-ins with the French service crew of it was somebody who ran very quick in a Renault 11 Turbo, Elaine Array, and I think it's his wife that navigates for him. We got on well with them, no problem. It was the service crew, and we had one lad who used to work for us, Chalky White. Christ, he'd puff his chest out and go and chin him, if they got in the way. But it was good entente cordial, I suppose,
Yeah. But that, as you say, Didier drove the car right-hand drive, which was completely alien to him. But you were one of the first to convert a Metro to left-hand drive then as well.
Yeah, well, because he was doing so well, I think it was after God, what's the round now? I don't remember the name of the round now. No, it's not coming to me. It'd be about halfway through the season. And I said to Katanak, the manager, I said, well, seeing he's doing so well, why don't we do him? Because we've got, I think it was 2 weeks, between the next event. If we get it back quick, why don't we convert it to left-hand drive, give him a surprise, and let him go on and win the championship, We'd had problems with the power steering on one of the earlier events. We had to put a pump on it. He'd driven something like a 20k stage without power steering, and the poor lad was sweating like hell when he come off the stage. We did the repair, and I actually knelt in the driver's seat. And when I got out, my knees were soaking wet with sweat,
Coming off him, yeah.
After that, we drilled holes in the bottom of the seat, But he went on to win the event. We had the problem at the last event of all things, where we had a rear flange break, and he'd come off the stage. There was service waiting for him. This was the last stage of the day. We had to literally rip the sump guard off it because it had worn the sump guard away and the attachments of it. We ripped that off. We put a new rear right-hand corner in it. He took off down the road like a scalded cat. There was somebody waiting on the main road when this side road come off, stopping the traffic so as he could come out the road sideways and up the road. Didn't lose any time. And of course, he started the next day. He put out very, very good times. I think he was fastest on the rest of the stages, but he'd lost so much time. He finished 9th overall. And of course, then it was a draw between Chatriot and Didier as to who won the championship, and it went back on who won the most events. Mm-hmm. And then it went, because Didier had won the most events, so it went back to him,
Mm-hmm. Very nice, very nice. And then the car you're running in the UK, the BRC, then was done up, like the works colour scheme, computer vision. Were you just working closely with the factory as well there, or was it an independent team but just running the same colour scheme?
No, it was close to the factory.
Okay.
Hoyle was building the engines. Again, that's another tale from Hoyle and the problem we had with the engine. There was a horrible clacking noise on the first engines we got. When you first started it, it just sounded like pre-ignition when you started it. And that can't be right. So I asked Terry to send me a spare block up so as I could have a look at it over the weekend, and I had a good look at it. And the engine had been designed by David Wood, who was an ex-Cosworth man, apparently. And his work had been done with, shall we say, vertical engines, where the cylinders are vertical and are not in a V. Now, I noticed that where the water came out of or went back into the block from the water pump, it was well below the block surface. And if you look at it really properly and poked it with metal rods and things, there were gas pockets at the top of the block. So I spoke to Terry Hoyle about this, and he said, he said, yeah, I've been thinking about that. I said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do, Terry. I said, I'll send you the piece of kit that I've made to sort the problem. I'd made a little jig up so as you can drill the block, you can drill the head, and it relieves the gas pockets in the block. And it's only in the block, but it's got to come up through the head,
Mm-hmm.
And that sorted this problem out. And Terry's go, yeah, I've seen that problem, but, Anyway, superb little car. Fragile at times, but, it did what it said,
Mm-hmm.
Sounded gorgeous.
Oh, yeah, the noise, yeah.
You should have heard it up in the mountains, Jesus Christ. No, nothing in the silencers.
No.
Silencers,
Class.
Don't mind over there.
And those, again, at that time in France as well, you had 33 Export as the main sponsor and all. That was a real prestige company that was involved with the team as well.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Well, Didier brought that on. Of course, it was Austin Rover France that was involved as well. They had the managing director out on every event that we did.
Yeah.
They supplied a lot of cars for people to run around in.
Yeah, for sure. And then Group B obviously then got banned, and that was where do we go next? And as you mentioned in earlier, the Lancia looked as if it was coming on stream. Was that going to be running Didier and all, or was that just a UK side to the team?
The Group B?
No, the Lancia. If never the Group B was banned, you just looked at you just looked as if you were going to run Lancias in 87. Was that just going to be for Jimmy in the UK, or was that going to be
just
France as well?
Just purely for Jimmy.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, because it was Ford France that was footing the bills and that for Didier's 87, 88 Cosworth thing,
Mm-hmm. And we've talked about the Lancia deal just evaporated, and was that kind of part of the reason then why you went down the Ford route with Jimmy as well then too, because you had to tie up with Ford in France? Was it kind of you knew the car?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
And that was sorry, Conor, come on there.
No, I was going to say, just with running, the two championships, again, you were running, was it 4 shells at that stage? And then that was before you even got involved with the Group N. There was more work for you, a lot of logistics, moving cars back and forward to France and that.
Yeah, well, we had the big transporter, she would take, she'd take 2 vans on the bottom, chase, and two rally cars on the top. We had a workforce right at the height of things. We had 17 mechs working for me. There was 2 HGV drivers. Our Jim, God rest his soul, he did most of the driving. There's a lad not far from me I'd known for donkey's years. He came to work for us. He was building transmissions for the Cosworths, which were the Getrag boxes, not the T5 boxes. He did driving as well when Jim was doing other work in this country, And And of course we had two Mark II transits, two Mark III transits. We had the Iveco, which was an ex-Pirelli tyre van. We were running that as well. As you say, the big logistics operation, and of course, John Milley was the man who was sorting it all out. Brilliant guy,
Mm-hmm. And those become very successful days then too. We had Jimmy on board in the British Championship, and you just won the British Championship a couple of times and won the French Championship. It must have felt nearly everything you touched at that stage was turning to gold for you.
I did, because I was very proud of the fact that I'd started the company with just myself.
Mm-hmm.
We'd also done some Group N race. We did a Group N race car for a Dutch guy. I believe his money came from my old drug trade, but never mind. I'd done some suspension work for Kenny, actually. Kenny McKinstry.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'd done for his Group N car, I'd given him some advice, shall we say,
Mm-hmm.
For the Group N car he ran.
The Caliber Sierra was out?
Yes, yeah. For his Group N car, yeah.
And that stage, Auriol won the Tour de Course, and that was 88. Was that one of your cars then at that stage, or was that a Borum car he had then?
That was a Borum car.
Right, yes.
That was Ford France. We'd done it the year before in '87.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the car was still in its infancy then, in development.
Mm-hmm.
The sump guard they had for that was a carbon Kevlar guard. He'd done either a jump, a yump, or done something, but the guard came up and it cracked the sump. It wasn't bad, but we could continue. But what we were doing, fortunately, we had a with it being mainly sponsored by Ford France, we had a helicopter at our use, so I could go in the helicopter along with Frank, and we stopped in a field and stopped him halfway through the stage. Jim Little was there as well. He was waiting in the middle of the stage. Up come the bonnet, the engine's still running, off with the oil cover, dumped a load of oil in it, and then cover back on, bonnet down, and he was off. And at the last service of the day, down on the shoreline, we dropped the guard, dropped the sump, dropped the mains out of it, checked the mains were okay, dropped the big ends were okay, put it all back together, trunk guard back on, and we finished 8th overall. And of course, the next day, or the next year, Ford France, I assume, wanted Borum to get involved,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a full Borum effort for them,
Yeah. But Didier probably carried a lot of his information across, and it was probably your setup that was running the car.
We weren't running, Borum were running it.
No, but it would have been a lot of your knowledge and your setup that Didier would have put into that car to be successful then.
Well, Borum had gone their own way on suspension.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay.
Right. And obviously, my setup took the French Championship twice. Borum's Championship took Tour de Course,
Yeah.
They were totally different, especially the rear end was totally different,
Yeah. And you think the Group A that would be very standardised, but no, there was obviously niches that are wee avenues you could go down that you felt were better, and Borum felt something else was better.
Yeah, it's also the roads as well. Some of the roads in France are totally different to Corsica.
Okay.
Although it's a French, it's a French part of
territory,
France.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And then also like Jimmy McCrae then back at home as well too. You know, you're a big part of his story. Like 2 more championships, 2 more Circuit of Ireland ones. Like he's still, you know, what is it, 7 Circuit of Ireland ones. Like you know, as far as we're concerned here, the man's almost like a god. Like was he a real pleasure to work with as well?
Absolutely, yeah. And his son, you know, both of them, you know.
Yeah,
I got on well with Jimmy. You know, it's we had problems with the Sierra, widely loom problems causing misfires and things, but we still win events with it. You know, we did he was chasing David. You know, with the non-turbo Quattro in '87. You know, as David, I think, won the Scottish that year. Jim was second. You know, his home event, he wanted to win it. So I said to him the next year, I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. I'll get in touch with Mike Endine. Mike was the forerunner of X-Track, the transmission people, you know. And I'd known Mike for, a long, long time. So I went down to see him. I took a 9-inch diff down to him. And I said, will you make me a plated diff that we can adjust? Oh, no problem. He said, no problem. So we sorted that out for us. We went up to the Forest of A in Scotland. We went up for 2-day test with Pirelli as well. Beauty with the diff, I could take it out and I could adjust it there and then. It wasn't automatically adjusted in any way, but I could adjust it with plates and ramps and things. And we had all the times from the different settings that we put in through the 2-day test, and then obviously the different tyre combinations. And we ended up with a setting that he was very happy with, and also a rear adjustment on the suspension on the camber side of it for starting and hairpins. And of course he won the event, you know. First time, the only time he'd won his own home event, you know.
Yeah, because that had been the elusive one, hadn't it? He had been chasing the Scottish one for 10, 12 years probably at that stage.
Yes.
Yeah. And then in the middle of, you know, before Colin come on board, there was a switch over to a Celica Toyota GB got involved. That was probably like it could have been something very special.
Yeah, I was put in charge of that, separate from Widnes Finland Road RED. I went back to the original Dock Road unit that I originally started off with, the 2,000 square foot Dock Road underneath the railway arches and that.
Yeah. You always see the old photos. Yeah.
I went back there. I took one of the lads, out the workshop, and spoke to David Ewells from Toyota. We got a shell, took it down to Gartrack, discussed with Dave what we needed. The shell was sorted by them. The manager and I went out to Cologne, to TTE, to see them about parts and things. Most of the parts were available, that's no problem. The problem was a right-hand drive rack, a power rack.
Of course, yeah.
So I asked them for the plans for the left-hand drive rack. They supplied them. I brought them home. I had them transported into right-hand drive drawings for the company to make a pattern. Then that was machined. I finished machining off the tube and things for the rack, built the rack. Then, of course, we had the right-hand drive rack that Jimmy wanted, you know. Yeah. The car was built. We ran it on the Audi Sport that year, 88, was it? Yeah.
88, yeah.
They'd had problems with the extract castings at the bottom of the bellhousings cracking, and they wanted to know why, because all the testing that the factory had done, they'd run it to basically where it had ruined. You couldn't find out what the problem was, you know. So as soon as the crack appeared, I said, that's it, you know. Let's stop, give the feedback to extract so we know what the problem is. And then we'll sort the problem and go that way, you know. And then, of course, we did all the development work to go on to the RAC. Unfortunately, I can't say who actually built the engine. Unfortunately, the engine was built wrong.
Oh, right, okay.
That's all I can really say. The engine was built wrong. Jimmy come on the radio. I think they'd come out of Clumber Park, and he said, there's an awful knocking in the engine. And I got, at the time, the factory had also had crankshaft brake, you know. I said, well, perhaps you've got a broken crankshaft, Jim. I said, what's the oil pressure? Oh, he said, it's 6 bar. I said, well, that's as it was. There's nothing wrong with the oil pressure. And then that's when it clicked, because I'd seen the engine being put together with all the parts on the bench.
Okay.
And then it just clicked as a photographic memory that I seemed to have. It clicked with me that the problem was, I can't say what it was, but anybody who's built one of those engines knows if you've got 6 bar of oil pressure and you've got a big end that's gone, you know what the problem was.
Okay.
And of course, then was the RAC over. We wanted to run Jim with the car, but the only thing was there was only the British Championship available with the Toyota.
Okay.
Ford were offering more,
Okay.
and Ford wouldn't allow us to run 2 teams, 2 makes in the same team.
All right, yes.
Even though I was prepared to go
A different workshop and everything, yeah.
back separate workshop and run them from that, but no, they wouldn't have it. So we decided to stay with Ford, you know.
Yeah. And then, well, obviously that opened up the door. Well, Phil Collins took the Celica and was hugely successful with it. But then that opened
Yes.
up the
Yeah.
that opened up the door for Colin to come in and join Jimmy then the Ford.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
And like that was then the Group N car. And again, you know, probably going back to a question I asked you about our end, it's probably unfair. Was it obvious the talent he had from the start?
Yeah, when I built the Group N car, again, we went up to the Forest of Hay to test it. And even though you've seen him in a car driving on some of the videos, you see, he is so calm. And Jimmy isn't calm like Colin. Jimmy moves the steering wheel quite quickly, which really upsets the grip of the car, of the tyres, you know. But Colin, it was like a Sunday drive. We were going up through these long curves uphill, and with 4th gear, 120 mile an hour, you know, absolute sideways, and it was just so calm, you know, as if he knew exactly what the car was going to do. And this was the first time he'd driven it, you know.
It just had that sixth sense that they talk about.
Yeah.
And you have been so privileged, you know, to have the opportunity to sit beside some of the greats of rallying over the years there.
Yeah, I sat obviously with Harri testing, you know. Sat with Malcolm, thrashed the backside out of the 1600 eyes around Eskdale Muir up in Scotland, you know. Tested, well, all the ones that I've run, I've tested with, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, you know, we've seen what Colin went on to do, but like you just run him then for a couple of years, first in the Group N car and then to the Group A car as well. And like we think of the RAC in those years as well too, like some of the escapades, and like he really captured the public's imagination. Like a bit like what you were saying about Ari, you never knew what shape the car was going to come back in, but it wasn't going to be through like a trying in Colin's part.
No, well, Colin drove the car to get it to the end of the event, no matter what stage it was in. I mean, today the police wouldn't allow it. They wouldn't let it carry on. But no, he'd drive it until it literally wouldn't go any further. Oh, he came in one service at night time in the middle of the country on the RAC, battered to hell. He's complaining the back door won't keep shut, and of course it was so deformed. So I looking around and I saw this bolt and latch on a farmer's gate. So we took that off and welded it onto the shell and the door, closed the latch, and that was it. The door would stay shut.
Needs must.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what is it? Form. I can't even think there's a word in it. Form over function or something like that. Function over form. That's the one I'm looking for. Yeah. And then Russell Brooks was involved then with the team as well in the Sapphire Sarah. Was Colin in the team that year as well, or was it? Was he moved on? So he's run the two guys then together, and Russell was always very measured about his approach, very methodical, and was there kind of almost yin and yang in the team, the two different styles?
Yeah, I got on well with Russell. He helped us develop the four-wheel drive system that we put in the Sapphire, because the factory were not running a big diff for right-hand drive. So I again got in touch with it's terrible, when you get to this age, your bloody memory goes. It was X-Track again, but Mike had left then, and there was a manager involved. I can't remember his name. I spoke to them, and again I spoke to John Wheeler at Ford, and I said, "Will you send me up a drawing for the sump for your big diff, and I'll get Mike to sort something for us." So we did that. X-Track again got involved. They sent the first sump and diff up with the drive shafts. That was put into Russell's car. We went to Ireland and literally beat the thing to death, the front wheel to death, the front diff to death, but it failed. It broke the whole front nose off the diff. Aluminium housing failed. Oh, I said, okay. And there's Alan McGuinness, who's to do with ProDrive, a big lad at ProDrive now. He's doing this Paris Dakar type stuff. Alan. Alan worked for me a long time ago. And I said to Alan, I said, right, let's get the diff out. You put it on the trailer, get yourself back to base. I jumped in the chase car that we had, took the diff, and I went down south and went to Fishguard. Come over to Fishguard, and then straight up the M1, up the M4, went to see X-Track, and within 2 weeks, I had a revised diff casing and parts, and they lasted the RAC. And of course, before that, it was Russell's win on the Manx in '90. That was again my sump diff and drive front end. So as we could put a big diff in a right-hand drive car. And
I've noticed now throughout the chat, a lot of parts. You come over to Ireland to test out parts now. Is it the unique nature of the roads over here that makes it ideal, or is it the availability of being able to close a road, or what's the appeal of coming over to Ireland?
No, it's so you can close the roads.
Yeah.
So you can close the road. We went over to, when we were on the 1600 I's and had the gearbox problems, we went over to Muckish Mountain with Malcolm, and we spent about 7 or 8 hours up and down Muckish Mountain trying to break the gearbox, but the bloody thing didn't break.
And I think you've done the same with David Llewellin too before the circuit. There's a vision in my head of see a photo of him in the Metro before as well.
Yeah.
So it obviously was a good testing ground for development of a car.
And the roads over there are not as busy. Some of the roads you can choose are not as busy, and the police allow you to, within reason, close the road off. So long as you've got radio contact from both ends. And I mean, we're only usually 3 or 4 mile length sort of thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Very good. And then 91. Russell had moved on, but Bertie Fisher had bought the Brooks 4x4 Sierra, and Bertie didn't give it to you as easy. The first event was West Cork, and he'd done a lot of damage, but the car had to be ready in 2 weeks' time before the circuit earned.
Yeah, I'd left the company by then.
Oh, right, had you? You were away.
I left the company at the end of 90, I think it was.
Ah, okay.
I'd had a big bust up with the management.
Right.
I'd had not a bust up with Jeff Fielding, but I just didn't see any other work coming in for the preceding years.
Okay.
So I'd had quite a few stand-up arguments in the workshop with the manager, asking me, why are you spending this money on these parts? Well, you develop a motor car, you develop parts, you've got to spend money. We're winning championships, what's the problem? And he just really got up my back. So I said to Brenda, my wife, I said, I've had enough, Bren, It comes a time when you've got to stop hitting the horse, haven't you, and get off and go and do something else,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then I think was it Ellen Morgan contacted you?
She did, yeah.
Yeah, James Collin was in again a bit like Jimmy wanted to win his rally. His rally was Donegal, and he was desperate to win it. He had tried for so many years and just could never get it. So you got the call.
I'd started doing some mercenary work for various people. I'd been out to Finland for Tommy Mäkinen, through Rob Arthur. I knew Rob the navigator. I knew him very well through Jimmy. I'd also done mercenary work for Mamdouh Kayat in the Eastern Championship out in Cyprus and Lebanon, And then I got a phone call, off Ellen, I think it was. How do you fancy coming over and setting up the motor, So I went over, had a word, had a look at how the car was set up. I think we went to what's his name's garage who was sponsoring.
Oh, Tony Kelly.
Tony Kelly, yeah. We went to his garage, got me all the measuring kit out, measured it, thing was wrong, so I sorted it all out. James took it up the road, come back, bloody hell, felt the difference, And of course he won the event,
Yeah. Because I was chatting to him recently, and he pays great tribute to you because he said it just transformed the car. Under braking, it was all over the place before, and suddenly he was putting his foot on the brake, and the car was reacting the way it should react. He says it was just like stepping into a completely different car.
Yeah, it's all in a big learning curve, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You do things, it doesn't work. You remember that. You go a different way, that works great, so you keep it in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's that knowledge that you can bring to people. Like you had all that wherewithal, all that knowledge, and you were just happy to share it.
Yeah, absolutely. I still do today.
Yeah.
I've got work in the workshop now for people. I do stuff for people. Suspension stuff, and I make suspension things for people. Just keep busy.
Yeah, and is it always trying to figure a better way of doing things? Like it's the same as the Mark II. Like Ford had developed it for 5 or 6 years, but you were always looking for a different way or a better way of doing things. Does that still drive you to this day?
Yeah, it's still, but I mean, I'm 78 now, and you can't do as much because I've got aches and pains and problems with my hands and things. You just can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I can still advise people on what I think is probably the right way to go.
Mm-hmm.
And Ray, when you look back, like obviously an engineer is a troubleshooter, a problem solver. What are you most proud of having, developed or fixed?
Oh God. I don't know. It's difficult to say, isn't it? I think I'd probably think the 4T is the most thing that I've most got pride in developing. From the word go, and my thoughts on what should go into it, and that and the way to go about doing it. It's
And as I said, I know you have worked with some of the most iconic drivers, some of the most iconic cars. Like when you're looking back now, you're saying you're 78. You look back now over the last 40, 50 years. There has to be an immense amount of pride to look at photographs that's coming up on the internet or on social media and think, I was part of that story.
Oh, quite often I see something and I think, well, that's one of mine. That's one of my girls.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And there's probably the black car. There's so much misinformation out there. It must be give you a giggle every now and again to read some of the things that goes up online about some of the developments that you helped to create.
It does. Yeah. I mean, there's an awful lot of myths around, isn't there?
Yeah. Uh-huh. But isn't that the great thing about rallying? Sometimes the myth's nearly better than the real story.
Well, it certainly is over in Ireland. Yeah, certainly the crack is right over there.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And some young guy starting out now in an engineering field, would you recommend rallying as a good place to ply your trade?
Yeah, it's certainly totally different to when I started, I suppose if that's the way they want to go, it's a good thing. You get to see the world and that,
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly an awful lot easier than what it was in my day, when you were like going out to Ireland on the circuit, and it was service before an event or before a stage and after a stage if you could get there,
Yeah.
And you were never still. You're always on the go.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's centralised service, and that's it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And do you look back now from you're ready to leave school? Have you any regrets that you didn't become a chef, or you're happy enough with your choice of career?
No, I haven't. I mean, I like cooking and that, but no. I got the wife laughing in the background,
She might not be as complimentary towards your cooking.
No, she has her own way of doing things and cooking, She's quite plain to do with food. And of course, I've had to live off all sorts of different food wherever you go, and I will eat anything,
Yeah. Well, Ray, I don't know what anything more than I can say. And it's been an absolute privilege, Connor. I'm sure you'll like that as well.
Yeah, listen, it's been fantastic to listen to your story, Ray, and I really hadn't got a clue of half of the achievements and the stuff you've been involved in over the years. It's genuinely been amazing, to hear you retell some of the stories, and I'm sure there's loads more that you haven't even had a chance to touch on.
Oh Christ, there's so many different stories, tales, and things. You can only touch on a small amount, in the time that you've got.
So thanks again there to Ray, an absolute pleasure, and could have listened to him for another hour there, the stories, just easy manner.
It's just, when you listen to the stories and you think of the connections to here between Vatanen and the MCD, black and white, the Black Beauty escort, Jimmy McCrae in that red Sierra when he won the circuit in 87, and then, Llewellin in the 6R4. It's just amazing stories. And, that one guy, one person has been at the heart of all of those.
And and James Cullen is is adamant that he played a huge part in his 91 Donegal one as well too, because it just made that car so much easier to drive. And just that's Ray, can't thank you enough once again. So that is another episode of the 2025 season. As always, please like, share, rate, subscribe. All those things make a huge difference. So until the next time, take care, speak soon, and bye.
That's the proudest day and the proudest time and the seat of a rally car, because that day and that hour and those minutes, I got the bit between my teeth. I really stood up and was counted and said, this is not getting away. I remember when we pulled on our helmets and Donald says to me, what are we doing? I said, we're going for gold, Barrett. That's all we said. I can still picture that run. That was just the best run ever.